This is Financially Fit Radio with Cory Sickles from Safe Harbor Wealth Advisors. Retirement isn't just about saving, it's about having a strategy that helps you navigate market ups and downs, combat inflation, and secure the future you deserve. That's why Financially Fit Radio is here to tackle your biggest financial concerns, share actionable strategies, and help you move toward your retirement goals with confidence. And now, here's Financially Fit Radio with Cory Sickles.
Welcome back to another episode of Financially Fit Radio. I'm Cory Sickles with Safe Harbor Wealth Advisors. If you have any questions or concerns about today's meeting, feel free to reach out to us by giving us a call at 614-760-0670, or you can always visit our website at safeharboroh.com. While you're on our website, feel free to click on that radio page. You can listen to today's show, previous shows. You can also subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or Spotify. Also, feel free to watch today's show on our YouTube channel. Just type in Safe Harbor Wealth Advisors. You can watch today's show. You can also watch some other video shorts for financial education. And also make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can be kept up to date when we release new videos as well. You know, we're here to help and guide you to make sure you have the best retirement that you possibly can. And just remember, when you do schedule a meeting with us, all meetings are complimentary and there's no financial obligation. Today, we're going to talk about, are annuities worth it? And really, what do you need to know to make the decision to find out whether it's the right fit for you? But before we get into that, let me introduce to you my co-host this week and every week, and that's Tony Shore. Tony, how are you?
I'm doing great. Yeah, had a busy week. I've been doing some projects, put some steps down the back hill in my backyard, had to dig those out, get that project done. That was a lot of work, Cory.
I think you mentioned that last week. So
I did.
That was a couple weekend project.
Yeah, I started it last week. I finished it this week, and I had to go down to my parents this weekend too. Now we're starting to build a catio for our cats. It's like an outdoor screened-in room that they can access through the house. My wife has this list, and all of a sudden I'm a handyman, Cory.
How do they actually get out through a window?
Yeah, it's built, and you put it against the house. And then you just open a window and they can go out and roam around in there. It's underneath our deck. We have an elevated deck on the top floor and a walk-up basement on the bottom floor and a window that looks out. And so underneath the deck, there's just rocks and landscaping. So I'm moving that, and going to build that. So I've started that project. I'll let you know when that's finished. It might be a while.
You're going to put like a little bird feeder out there for them?
Yeah. There's already birds.
For the birds, yeah.
They
can watch all the birds and all that good stuff.
Yeah, we have a dog.
How many cats you have? How many cats?
3. Yeah,
3 cats.
3 and a dog. Yep.
Yeah.
We're
at least they can be out there for a couple months out of the year.
Exactly.
Up in Minnesota.
I'm gonna build that thing. I don't know what's gonna happen. So we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see. How about you, Cory? I know you did. Did you do some golfing this weekend?
I did do some golfing. We had our member guest. We did not win the member guest. So always next year, Tony.
But how did you personally play?
I played 4 good rounds. 1 round I didn't play well, and we kind of got waxed. That's kind of cost us winning our flight. So that happens.
That's too bad.
That happens.
Yep. Well, hey, I know you've got a good show lined up for us today. This is a topic that I don't know if we've talked about this one specifically, drilled down on this in a while, and it's huge, right?
We haven't talked about this in a while. Yeah, and it is huge. So, obviously, I think there's a lot of people that are concerned about a couple things we'll talk about today. One is investing in the market, losing, part of your principal for market losses. The other part of it is, I think a lot of people are more worried about making sure they have that monthly paycheck per month as well. We'll talk about the impact it can actually have is with being able to create a lifetime income stream, just like a pension as well. So, there's different types of annuities, Tony. There's fixed indexed annuities. There's a fixed. A fixed is like, a 5% rate for 2 or 3 years, but it's a fixed rate for a period of time, kind of like a CD. And then there's variable annuities, and obviously a lot of those can go up and down with the market, which is why it's called variable. At Safe Harbor, really, we just do fixed annuities for clients that want that fixed rate. Or what we're really going to talk about today is fixed indexed annuities.
Yeah.
So the nice part about a fixed indexed annuity is your principal is protected, right? So yes, you get to invest like in the S&P 500, and there's other different types of indexes you can invest in. But the nice part about that is your original investment is protected. So if the market does go down, the worst you'll ever do is make zero. And, during years, like a couple years ago where the market was down around 20%, those type of years, when you invest in products like this, we normally tell our clients, zero's your hero because, hey, you didn't make any money, but you didn't lose any money as well. So it's a good way to be able to protect your principal, right?
Yeah. Well, and I like that zero is your hero because if the market's down and we have another correction like we did in April, if it's down over 10%, you don't need to worry about it because your principal's protected. But if the market's up 20%, you're going to get to participate in at least some of that upside. So you still get some gains and some growth, and you don't have to worry about losing principal. That's kind of the key here, isn't it?
Right. And a lot of times your investment's linked, it's linked to some type of index in the market. So I'm going to use the S&P 500 out there. So there's some fixed indexed annuities that are offering anywhere from probably about 8% growth on an annual basis to about 12% growth on an annual basis right now. If you're focused more on the accumulation side. Well, if you really think about it, here's the way I always try to compare these type of products. One is, as we kind of go through today's show, a lot of times you're doing this either for principal protection or you're going to be able to do it for income. So if the S&P 500 does go up over a year for 20% and you have a 10% cap, then you're only going to make 10%. But the big part of that is when the market goes down 20, then you lose zero. So you're giving up some of that upside growth to be able to have protection. The other side of that, Tony, is really when we do products like this, you can't really compare it like I'm going to invest in the S&P 500. We always compare this is you want to compare this really for your safe money. And your safe money is going to be invested in CDs, bank accounts, or bonds, right? And I think we found out a few years ago that bonds weren't necessarily safe when they were down over 10% on an annual basis. So the question is can these type of products outproduce a bond over the long term? And I would say yes, they would be able to do that. And when you throw that into a risk level and trying to be able to find out what your risk score, we talk about risk score all the time and allocation and things like that. An annuity could be a good hedge when you compare that versus bonds.
Well, and you mentioned bonds. I wanted to ask you, the old rule was 60-40 split. People felt they had enough safety if they had 60% in the market and 40% in bonds. But from the sounds of it, just to clarify, your principal, when you put money into bonds, let's say I have $100,000, just to use an example, $100,000 worth of bonds, I can lose money. My principal's not protected in any way, right?
That is correct. I mean, it goes up on, obviously it pays some type of dividends, but it does go up and down based upon the market.
Sure.
And, a couple of years ago when interest rates, started to climb, it was the first time in many years where you actually had double-digit losses in bonds. So yes, your principal did go down. And you have to remember this, if you lose 10% in a bond, it's going to take a long time or a few years for that to come back. It's not like the market. It could come back and make 20% next year. Bonds, a good year for a bond might be anywhere from, let's just say 4 to 6%, on an annual basis.
Okay. So I just was wondering about that. And you're right. Back in 2022, both the stock market and the bond market were down. So the old 60-40 rule didn't work.
It did not work. And so here's the part of that. So let's just talk about that 40% that you just mentioned, Tony.
Sure.
Bonds, right?
Yeah.
So, obviously one of the things that we always want to look at is when we set up allocations, I'm not necessarily saying I'd recommend all 40% of the safe money actually into an annuity, because there's other things that kind of go in. Everyone's situation is a little bit different, but you might want a little bit of liquidity. So when you actually invest in a fixed indexed annuity, you might have to actually keep it in there, for example, anywhere from 5 to 10 years. Now, if it's an income play, we're going to talk about an income here in a few minutes, then it's not a concern because you want that to grow anyway, and you're going to turn it into a lifetime income stream. But the one thing we do want to have, Tony, is liquidity. So let's just go back to that $40,000 example. We might end up wanting to put maybe 30% into the annuity and 10% into a bond, because you might actually need some type of money, and that's where we would actually draw it from, because it's not going to have as much market fluctuation as the stocks would, right? So there's a balance on what we're really trying to accomplish. It could be your age, and there's a lot of things that kind of go in when we do the allocation. So I'm not saying we put all your safe money into a fixed indexed annuity. That's why when we put together the retirement plan and the income plan, then we can give you a good recommendation on what percentage we'd recommend to go into an annuity.
Okay. Yeah. And I think it's great that, especially for people who are getting close to retirement or in retirement, that they get set up in something like a fixed index annuity. And these annuities have come a long way. I mean, it used to be, insurance salesmen would try to stick you in like a variable annuity with high fees, and you're not principal protected, but the companies have gotten very competitive. And I think that's what's created. They get better and better and more advantageous to the consumer, because they're trying to compete for you to use them and work with their companies. So we've got, no fee annuities out there, and a principal protection and some good upside. So they're very popular, I know, with all the baby boomers that had been retiring, these fixed index annuities. And, there are pros and cons to every financial investment, to whether it's the stocks, whether it's bonds,
right,
mutual funds, whatever it is, annuities, insurance, you see, okay, this one has less liquidity. I have to keep my money in it longer, but it provides principal protection, or this one provides a lifetime income. So I think there are a lot of advantages that a lot of people didn't used to have. I'm seeing better and better offerings out there, even within the market, like buffered index portfolios, right?
That's correct. I mean, if you actually look at the annuities today, actually the rates are some of the best that we've actually have seen probably in 12 to 13 years. So it's a good time to be able to actually go through the process to find out whether an annuity fits your needs, right? But you did mention a couple things, and I think we should probably just talk about that, briefly. And that is, what are some of maybe the drawbacks? What should you look at to see whether the annuity has maybe some negatives to it, right? I think every consumer needs to kind of go through that process to make sure they understand it. The first thing I would definitely say is you want to make sure you work with an advisor that's transparent. It's going to go over, maybe some of the things that you should look at just so you understand some of the negative impacts of the annuity. We already talked about the liquidity, right?
Sure.
So if you're going to put this in there for 5 or 10 years, if you want access to that cash, you're going to pay some type of penalty. And that's something that, we explain to our clients as well. You need to understand what the fees and costs are. When you get involved with variable annuities, for example, the fees and costs are going to be a lot higher than a fixed. Fixed normally have zero. And a fixed indexed annuity could be zero to maybe a lot of times you'll pay for it. Usually what you'll pay for is to have access to maybe more liquidity, or you're going to have an income rider. We'll talk about income here in our last segment.
Sure.
We already talked about participation caps, right? You're going to be capped on what you can earn. They're not going to give you all the potential upside with no downside. So you might have caps like we talked about of 7%, 10%, 11, 12%, whatever those might end up being, right? And then I think the other part you really have to look at is you want to make sure that you understand on why it fits within your retirement plan. You mentioned earlier about advisors. Well, we get paid a commission for these type of products. And you just want to make sure that they're putting the right amount into your retirement plan, because there is a commission paid. And you want to make sure that you're working with an advisor like us. We're registered investment advisors. So we still have a fiduciary obligation to you. So we're only going to recommend what we think is in your best interest. Yes, we will be paid a commission off of this, but again, we're putting a priority on your interest, not our interest, right? So I think one of the biggest selling points of an annuity, Tony, is it can actually have different types of riders. Life insurance companies love riders. You pay a little bit more for a rider, right? Whether it's life insurance or, in this case, an annuity. But one of the things that you can also do is you can actually have it. If you don't need the income, you can get a death benefit increase. So that can actually increase over time. You can get what we call long-term care benefits. There's some annuities out there that's going to be able to double your income, whatever that monthly income stream is, in order to help pay for long-term care if you can't do 2 of the 6 daily activities. Which means you don't even have to be actually in a nursing home. You could actually be at your house, and you can actually have more income coming from the annuity. And then we have what I consider just your regular lifetime income annuity, right? So this is very important, because this is where you're turning part of your retirement savings into a pension, which means you're going to be able to guarantee a payment for as long as you live. And if you do a joint, as long as you and your spouse live. And that's huge when we start talking about a monthly income stream, meeting your monthly budget, because we know you have a fixed amount coming in and month out. So
I love the fact that the riders, Cory, they're not too costly. They're not going to eat away at all your gains. If you're just to throw out an example, let's say one year you make 5%, the market did well and you make 5-10% on your annuity. At the end of that year, they lock in the gains, and you've gained some. The rider costs aren't that much. And so it's not like with variable annuities or other things where the fees would eat up any gains you'd have, so it's a wash, but you get those benefits and a lifetime income, and it's guaranteed on the claims paying. That's a guaranteed lifetime income, like Social Security or a pension, guaranteed for life, and those guarantees are based on the claims paying income abilities of the issuing companies, and that's why that's a benefit for people to work with an independent advisor like yourself, you can look at all the companies and say they offer the best deal and they're a top rated company. And I know you only do what's in your client's best interest. And if that best fits their needs to create income in retirement, you're going to recommend that. And you would never put everybody's eggs in one basket, not everything in the market, not everything in annuity. And I love long-term care. I wish my parents had set up a fixed index annuity with an income rider and probably a long-term care. They'd be in much better situation because they're both in long-term care now. So I love that. Long-term care is a big problem. We've talked about it on the show before, and this is one possible solution to at least help with that, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, people are living longer, which means at some point in time you're going to need some type of long-term care, right? I mean, it's just fact. We've had shows on this. I mean, there's if you're 65 or older, you have almost like a 70% chance that you're going to need some type of long-term care during your lifetime anymore. And the longer you live, the more you're going to be able to need it. And when we say long-term care, I think a lot of people think nursing home, and that's not the case anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, you could have someone that also includes people coming in, you living at your house, but you can't do everything that you need to be able to do. And you still need to have someone come in, cook your meals, maybe clean your house. But you can actually, if it works out for you, increase your income, for a number of years. So The other part of it is when we start talking about lifetime income, one of the first questions that I usually get from clients is, well, what happens if I die or my spouse dies? Well, the old way of doing annuities, Tony, was you used to what we call annuitize annuities. And when you annuitize an annuity, you actually gave up all your right to all that money. Now you guys are going to be able to get that guaranteed payment for as long as both of you live. But if something happened to both of you, for example, then the insurance company would keep the money. What we're talking about with fixed indexed annuities, Tony, is what we call it's a rider. So the nice part about it is you are guaranteed the payment as long as you live, or if you do a joint, as long as you and your spouse live. However, if there is any money left over when you do pass, it does go to your beneficiaries. So all the money is going to be used, and it's going to be either paid out to you, your spouse, or your beneficiaries. And I think that's very big when we start talking about understanding that, because let's compare that to a pension, right?
Right.
With a pension, odds are when you and your spouse pass, it's probably done.
Yeah.
So with an indexed annuity, you actually have a little bit more flexibility in order to be able to pass money on to your beneficiaries if something unexpectedly does happen, or if you die earlier than you should.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. It's interesting that there are scenarios where that can happen. I was going to make the comparison. I was going to say, people cringe. Oh, I don't know. I've heard annuities are not good, or I can get locked into something that, isn't the best for me. And I think they're talking about variable annuities, and maybe talk to people who had older annuities or somebody that didn't put them in the right annuity. But I was going to say people shouldn't be afraid of annuities. That's what Social Security is. That's an annuity. And that's what pensions are. That's an annuity. You want a guaranteed stream of income for life, like Social Security. A fixed index annuity is a good option to create your own personal pension, or in addition to Social Security. However, you just said one advantage, I never thought of that it has over pensions and Social Security, is that you can set up a death benefit with the policy, so that if once you pass, money can go to, if you pass before a certain time in certain circumstances, your loved ones or your spouse could get that. So I think that's really helpful.
I mean, you're exactly right. But here, as we wrap up today's show, really the question is, again, is an annuity right for you? I firmly believe a certain amount of money should go into everyone's retirement portfolio, with a percentage of that going to an annuity. But what you really need to be able to do is set up a complimentary financial obligation meeting with us. We'll put together a financial plan, and if an annuity makes sense for you, we'll recommend one. We'll make sure that here's the most important part, that you understand exactly why we're recommending it for you, and what the true benefits are going to be. Because again, we're here to help you make sure you have the best retirement that you can. And the one thing that you don't want to do, the number one concern of all baby boomers or anyone that's in retirement or planning for retirement, is outliving your money.
Yeah.
So this guarantees you of a certain percentage of your assets that they're going to be there as long as you are.
That's awesome. Well, a great show talking about annuities. I'm sure people have questions like, how much should I put into annuity? What percentage? Is it right for me? How can our listeners get a hold of you with these questions?
Yeah, just give us a call at 614-760-0670, or again, just visit our website at safeharboroh.com. And just remember, all meetings are complimentary. There's no financial obligation. And, we are fiduciary. We're independent, which means we have access to a lot of different types of products. And again, we're here to help and guide you to make sure you have the best retirement that you possibly can.
All right. Sounds good, Cory. And listeners, that does it for today's episode of Financially Fit Radio with our host, Cory Sickles.
Thank you for joining us for Financially Fit Radio. Don't head into retirement without a strategy that addresses both income and taxes. For more information, please contact Cory Sickles at Safe Harbor Wealth Advisors at 614-760-0670 or visit safeharboroh.com now. Join us again soon for another episode of Financially Fit Radio.
Investment advisory services are offered by Safe Harbor Wealth Advisors, LLC, and SEC Investment Advisor. Insurance products and services are offered through Safe Harbor Retirement Group, LLC, an affiliated company. Safe Harbor Wealth Advisors, LLC, and Safe Harbor Retirement Group, LLC, are not affiliated with or endorsed by the Social Security Administration, the Federal Medicare Program, or any government agency. All matters discussed during the show are for informational purposes only. Each individual situation may vary, and the opinions expressed here may not apply to everyone. Materials presented are believed to be from reliable sources, and no representations can be made as to its accuracy. All ideas and information should be discussed in detail with one of our qualified representatives prior to implementation. Calling this number will direct you to a licensed sales agent.